Welcome to EPG Pathshala. This is the course on history of American literature between 1800 and 1900. I am Shurmila Mojumdar, Associate Professor, Department of English, University of Kalyani, West Bengal. In this module, we will try to chart a course of American literature as it developed through the 19th century. But let me begin with a quote which is not verbatim. David Dacius once said that we are one people divided by the same language. And so this is primarily what is American literature about. The American literature is the corpus of literary works produced in the English language, but not on the English soil. It is produced on the soil of the United States. But before the late 17th, early 18th century, there was a joke around that whoever reads an American book in the four corners of the earth. So Americans' books were not taken seriously in the sense that there was hardly any international readership of American writing. And it also so happened that Americans were constantly looking back to their parents in the United Kingdom, and English literature has always been a yardstick by which American literature was judged. This was being done by the Americans themselves. So if somebody they were writing novels in England, they were trying to write novels. If the particular kind of poetry was being written in England, they tried to write that particular kind of poetry, and it took them from about 150 to 200 years from the time of the inception of the United States of America, not as an independent sovereign country, as a colony of the British. It took them about 200 years to construct their own identity culturally and then reflect it in their literature. So American literature depicts the socio-political, cultural and economic dynamics of the United States, and it became imperative for them to establish themselves as American, to talk about their social, their political, their cultural and their economic dynamics as different from the socio-political, cultural and economic dynamics of the British Empire. The growth of history and the radical development of the United States shaped the literature of the period. And America at the turn of the 18th century was not a world power, but by the turn of the 19th century it was. So huge change took place in America, in their history, in their political system, in their military power, in their financial might. So American literature reflected all these changes and the agents of changes and the way the American literature was shaped during this period. The production of American literature began with the advent of American Revolution. We do not talk about it always, but America was also a British colony, and the Americans, the Pilgrim Fathers who left England to settle on the shores of the New World, they were persecuted by the religious authority in England. They were Puritans, and so they left England to settle down in America. And the history of America in the early years of its colonization was largely puritanical, and though the Puritanic hegemony underwent change and moved towards secularism, Puritanism probably still holds a vice-like grip upon the American imagination. The American Revolution was actually their struggle for independence, and the Americans refused to pay tax to British monarchy because their slogan was no taxation without representation, because there was no American representative in the British Parliament. So the conflict started from there, and it culminated into a military conflict which was essentially political in nature, because most of these military conflicts are political in nature. And Washington, George Washington, the founding who is considered to be the founding father of the American nation, fought on with his army on behalf of the American settlers, and with the British army won the war, and the American state was established. Now you see what happens, when a country becomes politically independent, politically sovereign, that does not necessarily mean that they have imagined themselves as a nation different from their parent country, their culture as different from their parent culture. It is even more difficult for the Americans because they were sharing the same language, they shared the same European literary heritage. So there was great effort on the part of the Americans to establish their American identity. The four prominent authors of this period are Washington Irving, William Cullen Bryant, James Fenimore Cooper, and Edgar Allan Poe. They wrote in prose, they invented new forms, and in many ways they were professional writers, in the sense that they earned by writing. Though Washington Irving was a career diplomat, and Washington Irving served in various European capitals. They produced literary works which brought dynamism to the national life of American people. The early 19th century writers, Washington Irving. As I was telling you, he was a career diplomat, served in various European capitals. His first book is called The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, which is his pseudonym. It contains two very well-known stories. One is Rip Van Winkle, the other is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And James Fenimore Cooper, he wrote the Leather Stocking Tales, and this shows the tribal life of Natty Bumppo. Now you see, Natty Bumppo is probably the first indigenous American hero, because America didn't have a history, America didn't have a mythology, so they needed to invent one, and Natty Bumppo is the first in the series which James Fenimore Cooper invented. Now let me tell you something. The English settled on the eastern coast of the American continent of the USA, and they moved westward, conquering tribals as they moved westward, killing them, decimating them, pushing them into the woods, and moving towards the western boundary of the United States of America. And the tribals they met on their way, they were the frontiersmen in a way, because they were moving towards the frontier, and that frontier was being occupied by these people. And James Fenimore Cooper, he was not writing about the WASPs, which is actually white, Anglo-Saxon, Puritan male. So he was writing about the tribals, and he invented a hero, Natty Bumppo, who is the first in the series of American indigenous heroes. Then we come to William Cullen Bryant, who wrote The Embargo and Thanatopsis. American Renaissance is a term which was first used by F.O. Matthiessen. And what does Renaissance mean? Re is again, naissance is birth. So Renaissance is rebirth, and Matthiessen called it American Renaissance, because he considered these to be a rebirth for the American nation. The first birth was the settlement of the English, Dutch and other nationalities from the European continent, and the second birth was the invention of the American identity. And as he puts it in his book, this Renaissance is concerned about the devotion of all the 5 writers that he chose to discuss in the book, who was devoted to the possibilities of democracy. So you see, democracy was an all-consuming idea in America, because you have to remember that Europe was monarchical. Europe has been more monarchical from the very beginning, and the people who left their countries in Europe and came to America came to a society where there never have been monarchs. So the possibility of democracy was, may I say so, rife on the American soil, and they were more than willing to explore that possibility. So democracy, people who cherished democracy, he walked towards democracy. Matheson considered that these people were actually working towards American Renaissance. And authors in this period, the first we will come to the classic New Englanders, by which I mean the transcendentalists. The Transcendentalism is a movement in the history of American literature which is very, very important. Now, what is transcendentalism? What does the word transcend mean? Transcend means to go beyond. So, transcendentalism is a philosophy which advocates going beyond. Now, going beyond what? That's a very important question. Going beyond the rationalism of the 18th century, and I think more importantly the imposition of Puritanism on American life. So among these transcendentalists there were several authors like Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, and they all wrote about a new national consciousness, and there were other writers as well to whom I will come later, but I will like to talk about these 3 people slightly more elaborately. So you see, transcendentalism was a reaction against 18th century rationalism. It was about the fundamental belief in the unity of the world and God. Now you see, in a way, transcendentalism is a late flowering of European Romanticism, because you know, the European Romanticism took about, may I say so, 30 years to cross the Atlantic, because the Lyrical Ballads was published in 1798 and Emerson's Nature was published in 1936, which may be considered as the Transcendentalist Manifesto. There is a place called Concord where all these people converged, and they sometimes lived in communities. There were literary figures such as Emerson, Thoreau, Hawthorne. Hawthorne lived there for some time, and others like Fuller, Alcott and Channing. Ralph Waldo Emerson is probably better known as an essayist than a poet. His Nature and then the American Scholar is which is a Phi Beta Kappa lecture he delivered, if I remember, probably in 1837 at Harvard University. And he is talking about the American scholar. By scholar, he does not necessarily mean somebody who is very erudite, reads a lot and writes a lot. By scholar, he meant a complete man who is complete in erudition and in action, and he was trying to construct an ideal figure for the Americans to follow so that they can identify themselves as American, as separate from the English in particular and other Europeans in general. And it is something of an ideal which Emerson preached, because he was trying to construct an American national identity. There was Henry David Thoreau, famous for a book called Walden, or The Life in the Woods. He can be described as a civil rights activist as well. He actually lived in the Walden Pond, constructed a tree house, and interestingly refused to pay civil taxes because he argued that he didn't live in the area which was being governed by the local authority. Then we come to Walt Whitman. Whitman has been celebrated as the poet of democracy. He wrote only one book in his whole lifetime, which was first published in 1859. And there were several editions, and in each edition he kept on adding new poems. And not only that, this book is divided into several sections. He kept on shifting poems from one section to another. And there are several important sections in the book. Its first is called The Inscription. Whitman was an advocate of democracy. Whitman was an advocate of equal rights. Whitman is also probably one of the earliest feminists in America, because he said, I sing man as well as woman, and he was talking about complete man. He said, I sing about the body as well as the soul. So he set a trend which America probably followed for the rest of the century and well into the 20th century. Some of the poems which are being mentioned here: Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, Out of the Cradle, Endlessly Rocking, and When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed. I will concentrate on this particular poem, the last poem. This is an elegy which he wrote after the death of President Abraham Lincoln. He was a great follower of Abraham Lincoln, and there is a section in the Leaves of Grass which is entirely dedicated to the memory of the American president of the Civil War. The Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed is an elegy which is written on the European model, may I say so, which he obviously borrowed from the English model, where the entire nature mourns the death of a particular person. Next we come to the Brahmin poets. Don't you think the nomenclature is very interesting? The Americans are being called Brahmins, but Indians are probably in a better position to understand the nomenclature, because in our society Brahmins are the highest caste. So you see, they have a privileged position, and these American poets were particularly privileged because they all came of affluent families. They all went to Ivy League universities. Many of them taught at these Ivy League universities. That is why they are called the Brahmin poets. The first of the lot is Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Longfellow studied at Harvard and went to teach at Harvard. His major poems are Evangeline, The Song of Hiawatha, and The Courtship of Miles Standish. You know, Song of Hiawatha is in a way is very American in the sense that this is a hero, a local hero who is not a derived figure from the European inheritance, and it's a very long poem in which Longfellow celebrates the life and doings of Hiawatha. Then we come to James Russell Lowell. A Fable for Critics is a funny and suitable judgment of American writers. Lowell has a well-known descendant, as you will discover when you come to 20th century American literature. And Lowell was one of the earliest critics of American literature, because he criticized his fellow writers, he criticized writers of the immediately preceding period, and in a way set a standard for literary criticism in America. Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote The Autocrat of the Breakfast Table, Elsie Venner, The Deacon's Masterpiece, or The Wonderful One-Horse Shay, The Chambered Nautilus, Old Ironsides. So Holmes also belongs to these Brahmin poets who came from aristocratic American aristocracy. To make it absolutely clear, it's not actually the kind of structured aristocracy we talk about with reference to Europe. But it's a New World aristocracy in the sense they came from a rich family, went to an Ivy League school and taught there, and he wrote all these poems, and you know, they are temperamentally, in spirit and in their ideology different from the transcendentalists, because transcendentalists were talking about going beyond the societal restrictions imposed upon them, the restrictions imposed upon them by the puritanical church. And many of the transcendentalists, particularly Emerson, was an Unitarian minister, and these Brahmin poets were talking about things which were almost diametrically opposite to what the transcendentalists were talking about. They were conservative people. They were trying to talk about the ideal America which is there strongly in place, which they celebrated, unlike the transcendentalists who were talking about the tyranny of the puritanical church. They were talking about the right of the individual to talk to God directly without the intervention of the church. There were two reformers. One is John Greenleaf Whittier. He wrote anti-slavery poems such as Ichabod. His best work, Snowbound, it lucidly recalls the poet's deceased family members and friends. Now, you know, this is important because in another module you will read about the slave narratives, and here is an anti-slavery poem, and that is coming from a white American who was fully sympathizing with the causes of the anti-slavery movement. So you can be in a position to relate how this anti-slavery discourse was taking shape throughout the 18th and the 19th century and in America. And it is not only the political activists but also the poets, the philosophers, the prose writers. They were all part of this anti-slavery discourse. Then we come to Margaret Fuller. You know, Margaret Fuller was a historian by training, but she is probably the first important woman thinker in America. She was a feminist also. She wrote about the treatment of women prisoners and the insane in works like Papers on Literature and Art, Woman in the 19th Century. So she was also part of this transcendentalist group, and she imbibed the tenets of their philosophy, and she was talking about the rights of women, the necessity for women to be educated, for women to come out in the public place, to have jobs, to have a life outside domesticity. Then comes the Romantic period, and now if you remember, I already argued that transcendentalism was a late flowering of European Romanticism, and you have also noted that both that Hawthorne was a very good friend of the transcendentalist thinkers and stayed with them in their community living for some time. But something else you might be interested in, that Hawthorne was the descendant of a staunchly puritanical family, and his one of his forefathers was a party to the Salem witch hunt. Before he came to write novels, Hawthorne also worked in the government department and was in Salem, where he discovered the draft of a report written by Jonathan Pugh about witch trial of a woman, which he finally shaped into the novel The Scarlet Letter, because he lost his job and had enough time on his hand, and so he decided to write The Scarlet Letter. Now, I would like to talk about something else in this context. You know, Hawthorne wrote tales which have been variously described as novella, as short story, and America is the place where, may I argue, short story was kind of, the modern short story was kind of invented, theorized, and widely, very widely practiced. And it is Nathaniel Hawthorne's Twice Told Tales, an anthology of tales, which Edgar Allan Poe reviewed, and Poe's review has become the starting point for all talks about short story theory. So in a way, Hawthorne, Melville and Poe was a poet, Hawthorne and Melville were novelists, but poetry is not something that, may I argue, they invented, neither is novel, but short story is something that they invented and they popularized, and more importantly, they not only invented and popularized because Poe theorized about it, that gave a huge encouragement to the next generation of American writers to write short stories, and which became popular all over the world. And you know, it has been argued that short stories are best written in a society which is not rigid, which is not highly structured, which is not hierarchical, and which is in a position to accommodate the people who live on the margins of the society into the texts of the short stories. I am talking about this because when we go to the realist writers, for example, Ambrose Bierce has been named, who is a man from the American South, who was party to the Confederate Army, and he also wrote short stories, so that you can see in the length and breadth of the United States of America, irrespective of their political and ideological affiliation, people have written good and great short stories. And then there is Herman Melville. He is famous for his novel called Moby Dick. There are several others, Typee Umu, etc. He was a sailor by profession and largely self-taught. He read European English classics in particular, which Shakespeare in particular, and drew his inspiration from them. Then we come to a very troubled literary figure of the American literature, Edgar Allan Poe, who died quite prematurely. And he is supposed to be the father of detective fiction as well. Some of his important writings are The Premature Burial, Ligeia, The Cask of Amontillado, and The Fall of the House of Usher. There are poems as well. The Raven is very well known and probably part of syllabus of every American literature course. The women writers of the era, there is Harriet Beecher Stowe. Uncle Tom's Cabin is a book, if I remember correctly, which was translated into my native tongue, which is Bangla, when even I was a kid. And so I think almost all Indian languages have a translation of this book, and children grow up with the story of Uncle Tom's Cabin. And you have to remember that this is also a slave narrative, and Harriet herself was a former slave. Then there is Harriet Jacobs. She wrote Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. It's about women's rights. There is Harriet Wilson, Our Nig, or Sketches from the Life of a Free Black in a two-story White House North. And you know, she has already been talked about in the slave narrative module. So slaves, mostly black women, former slaves, who were important women writers of this period. Then we come to what has been described in the history of American literature as the phase of realism. You know, in America, there was a intervening period between the Romanticism of the earlier period. As you know, that Scarlet Letter has been described as a historical romance, Scarlet Letter, and there are several other stories and novels as well, which have been described as romantic. And between the romantic period in American literature and the realistic period in American literature, there is a borderline area which has been described, I think, very aptly as the local color movement period, which means that Americans were writing, because America is a huge country. So when you are in England, you are in London and you talk about Edinburgh. But when you are in New York, it's very difficult for you to talk about California in the 19th century, because traveling was a hell lot of a problem. And so people living in the western coast and people living in the eastern coast, they were almost living in two separate countries, and in the intervening landscape there were settlers from various European nations. So local color writing assumed a very important proportion in American literature as they negotiated between American Romanticism and American realism. These people were writing about their own experiences, so realistic, and these people were trying to put some colors of their perception on their realistic experiences, and so in a way they were romantics. So local color writing was a negotiation between American Romanticism and American realism. The first of these realistic writers is Mark Twain. Huckleberry Finn, of which I have talked in the slave narrative module, and non-fiction prose, Life on the Mississippi. But I would like to mention another novelist as well, William Dean Howells, who is considered to be the father of realistic novel in America. And these people, particularly William Dean Howells, was inspired by the French realists in a big way. And almost all of his novels concern the industrialized, materialistic, urban American life, its evils, its shortcomings, and he sounded some kind of alarm for this hot industrialization, pursuit of materialism, and consequently lack of values which he considered to be important for a healthy life. Ambrose Bierce is primarily a short story writer, and he came from the American South. Important works are Nuggets and Dust, The Fiend's Delight, and Cobwebs and Dust. Now, there are several other writers who belong to realism and also to naturalism. Some are borderline cases, we come to them later. But now we go to Henry James, and Henry James is a class by himself, and so I think a little more time should be devoted to talking about Henry James. You know, James was born into a wealthy family and traveled all over Europe and educated all over Europe. and then he came to live in England, becoming a naturalized British citizen only a year before his death. So, you know, there are mostly stories about Americans who chose to live in Europe and their interaction, negotiation with a culture which is different from their own. He promoted traveling in transatlantic sketches, The American, Daisy Miller, and The Portrait of a Lady, The Princess Casamassima. He has 3 phases in his writing career. The most important work of the first phase is The Portrait of a Lady, in which he very successfully employed the monologue, and you know, which in a way gave birth to stream of consciousness technique in modernist English novel. Naturalism is a literary representation of determinism. It is associated with miserable realistic depiction of lower class life. The French novelist Émile Zola is the most important propagandist for naturalist writing. Naturalists imagine society instead as a blind machine, godless and out of control. Important American naturalists are Stephen Crane, Jack London, Frank Norris, Theodore Dreiser, Upton Sinclair. They all used naturalism to relate the individuals to the society. And poets of the era, Sidney Lanier, and then Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson is again a very important figure in American literature. She was a recluse in the sense that she didn't allow the publication of his 1700 odd poems in his lifetime, but she is one of the most important American poets of the 19th century. And there are several poems that has been mentioned in this module, and there are several others very important, and most important theme in her poetry is his preoccupation with death, which is very unusual. She is not writing elegies, she is not trying to justify the ways of God to men through death. She was looking at death from various interesting perspectives. So now we come to the end of this module. What I have tried to do is to give you an idea of the development of American literature in the 19th century. What I will argue here is that the development of literature on the American soil in the 19th century is slightly different from the 18th century, because by 19th century Americans actually became Americans. They were very confident of their self-identity. They were coming in a big way to the international playground, if I may say so, and they were earning a lot of money. They were getting stronger militarily every day, and they were confident. And so in a way, American literature of the 19th century has left behind all traces of its European hangover. Thank you.